Hi, my name is Trainin and this is Tech Edge from the conference video. And with us now we have Kristin Javorsky, who is a kindergarten teacher and a graduate student. And we're going to talk a little bit about concepts of print, or concepts of digital print really. And can you explain a little bit what that means?
Sure. Concepts of print is essentially a way to describe what children know about how books work and the meanings that they carry. Mm-hmm. So things like how to hold the book, how to turn the pages, where to look on the page, mm-hmm. All of these things that they need in order to successfully navigate to the end of the story. And we know that research says that the print concepts are a moderate indicator of how their early reading success will go. So these are important things that the children need to acquire.
So they need to know them, it's not enough, but it's something that sets them on the right path. How do they learn those?
By a lot of exposure to books, a lot of time spent either at home or in the classroom, actually physically holding those books, reading them along with someone who knows more than they do about how that book works, just through a lot of exposure and practice.
Mm-hmm. So with the switch to digital devices, what happens?
What I found as a kindergarten teacher, I would give this print concepts assessment to my children coming in to find out what they knew and what I might still need to teach them. And it gave me very useful information about what they knew about the books that we were using in whole group or in the classroom library. But as I would go through other parts of the day and be using my smartphone to give some instruction or directing their attention up to the projector where the laptop was hooked up, I began to wonder if I really did know what print concepts these children had internalized and which ones I was perhaps making an assumption about, assuming that because I had taught them how to work their way through a traditional book, that when I then jumped over to the digital format, they could make that switch. And that's a very dangerous thing to assume. I really didn't know what they knew about looking at print in a digital environment. So that's been what my research has been focusing on. How do we find out what the children know about these print concepts in the digital format, and what do they need to know?
So what are those digital concepts of print, or concepts of digital print?
Well, there are really two ways to break those apart. Mm-hmm. One are those print concepts that perhaps can transfer from what they know about the printed book to using those same concepts to be successful in the digital environment. So things like concept of a word. We still look at the word, take the meaning of the word, put it into sentences, gather the larger meaning of the story, and that should be able to transfer with enough practice and instruction. Something else would be directionality. So the way that we look at that print from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right, that should be able to transfer. But there are some things about looking at print in the digital context that are very different, that don't appear on the printed page, that we can't assume the child will just naturally pick up without exposure or practice, the opportunity. Mm-hmm. So things like, how do I navigate this text? First of all, if it's on a digital device, do I know how to orient it? Some digital devices are set to automatically rotate, so the child never has to learn up and down. So if we turn that off, do they still understand that you need to orient the print a certain way? How do I navigate through this? I look at this screen that's in front of me. What's the equivalent of turning the page? How do I get further into the story? How do I go back in the story? How do I turn up the sound? Because this story can be read to me by the device. Do I even know that the story can be read to me by this device? So there are all these things that the child needs to learn in terms of navigation that are not print concepts that they learn from looking at a traditional book. Interactivity is huge. When you look at the printed page, you look and then you turn the page. Whereas on a digital device like the iPad, where I'm conducting my research, if I touch the picture, things may happen. Mm-hmm. The picture may talk back to me. It may become animated. If I'm struggling with a word on the page, do I know that if I touch that word, I can get assistance on what that word says? Mm-hmm. So there are all these additional things about the reading experience that the child needs to acquire to successfully make it to the end of the story that they didn't have to do in that printed book.
So I think that the biggest point that I'm taking from this, very much like the point that we made when we started with concepts of print, is that we assume that kids come to school with all of those skills. We see, and this is very, very common, we see these videos of 2-year-olds playing on an iPad, which is completely true, I think. I have young kids and they've been playing on the iPads for the last 2 years, and they're very good at navigating it. But some of the kids who will get to school, just like some kids didn't get enough exposure to traditional books, they might not have the same exposure to books that are available in digital format, even if they did play on an iPhone or other smartphones or even tablets. They might not have ever read on them. I mean, we can't assume. So that added layer just makes sure that all kids start at the same point. So there's this inclination I think we all have with technology to assume that because they're young, they know it all. But I think what you're saying is your experience is sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And if they don't, they're looking at this device and there's nothing productive happening because they don't know what to do next.
Mm-hmm. We can't assume that they're going to transfer what they know about the books we're using in the classroom onto that digital device. We have to explicitly demonstrate and teach and allow practice with that exposure, with that device in order for them to get it. And some of the children, you're right, will come with a lot of that knowledge. And because they have an iPad at home, and perhaps if they're in a higher income family where they've heard that this is good to put these educational apps on here, and so they come with some of that knowledge. And right now we don't have an assessment that tells us what the children know. There isn't a standardized piece out there. So teachers have to take it on themselves to say, what do these students know? How can I find out what these students know and teach them the parts that are missing, and not make assumptions that they already know it or that simply by being around it, it will just come to them. You have to actually take time to provide instruction and to give that practice in the classroom.
Okay, thank you very much. And this has been another Tech Edge from the conference video.